Hey students and family members, Mr. Panza helping you prepare for the Fraction A test. Tonight for homework is your Fraction A review. We did half of this today in school. If you missed anything in school or need to just fill in some blanks that you missed during the lesson, feel free to pause this video at any time, copy down the correct answers, then go back and see how we got to those answers. This is page 1. Here's question 1, 2, and 3 in the answers, as well as to 4, showing the students how to solve these different problems. Moving on to the next page that we did in school today, page 2, answers to question 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And once again, if you missed any of those, feel free to pause this video, go back, get the answers, and review. Moving on to the stuff we did not do. Lots of questions on this assessment are going to ask you in a different way for something that you've learned. For example, question 11 says, which fraction is less? They're really just asking you to compare these fractions. So, line them up like we're used to seeing them, 1/10 compared to 4/10. And recognize that 4 out of 10 is greater than 1 out of 10, but the question is asking me which fraction is less, and 1/10 is less than 4/10. Show your thought process on the side. Number 12 has a recipe for chocolate-covered peanuts and chocolate malt balls. Has a lot of different fractions here, and you can see they have different denominators. Does the recipe call for more chocolate-covered peanuts or chocolate-covered malt balls? It's just a comparison question, and a lot of this information here you can throw out. So I've got to find the chocolate-covered peanuts, which is 1/3, the chocolate-covered malt balls, which is 2/3, and then I'd put them next to each other in a comparison chart. Fortunately, they have a common denominator, and I can see 2/3, which goes with the malt balls, is the correct response. We also learned how to compare fractions that don't have common denominators, like number 13. I taught the students a 5-step strategy, which starts once again with writing the numbers across from each other, but giving yourself plenty of space, because you can't add, subtract, or compare fractions with uncommon denominators. So in this case, I've got to come up with an equivalent fraction with a common denominator, and then compare these two brand new equivalent fractions to each other. In order to do that, I've got to list the multiples. Now, I could start listing the multiples of 10. However, if I list the multiples of 5, I can see that 10 is a common multiple between both of these. If you didn't do it that way, and you did list the multiples of 10, maybe you went to 30, you would see 5, 10. If I listed the multiples of 5, I would also get to 20, and I could stop there, because 20 is now going to be my common denominator, if I didn't recognize that 10 was also a common multiple. And now I've got to create equivalent fractions like we did on one of the first 2 pages. You've got to recognize that to get from 10 to 20, we multiplied by 2. And if I change the denominator using multiply, the same to the numerator must be applied, which means that 3/10 is equivalent to 6/20. Do the same thing over here. A lot of students recognized that really what you were multiplying by were the number of multiples you had here, 4, because 5 times 4 gets me 20, and if I change the denominator using multiply by 5, the same to the top must be applied. I'm sorry, I put 5, it should have been 4. So 2 times 4 is 8. Which allows me to see that when I compare common denominators, I can tell that 8/20 is greater than 6/20, which means that 2/5 is greater than 3/10. To justify it, here's what you would say. You cannot compare fractions with uncommon denominators, so list the multiples of 10 and 5, which we did, finding a common denominator of 20, creating equivalent fractions, and therefore you can compare the common denominators, which means 2/5, which is equal to 8/20, is greater than 3/10, which is equal to 6/20. Flip it to the back. We did these word problems at school. You can see a KWS, what I know, what I want to know, how I solved it, is listed. And I was able to determine, because of the words how much and in all, that in this case I'm adding, and the same for 15. The bar models with fractions can be very helpful to see, are we dealing with a mixed number like we have in 14, or just fractions like we have in 16? Which leaves us with just a couple more problems. I want you to fill in the missing number here. You can see there's a subtraction determining what the difference is. So you've got to use your math brain and think, well, 4 minus what would get me 2? The answer's 2. And the denominators stay the same. 10 and 1/7, 8 and 4/7, we're adding. My whole numbers first, which I box in to show I have 18 wholes, and 4 plus 1 is 5, which is 5/7. And finally, put these fractions in order from least to greatest. Well, 1/8 is my lowest number. That would be listed as first. 4/8 is the middle number. So 1/8 would be the lowest. 4/8 would be the middle. And 5/8 would be my greatest number. And that's a review of fractions. Hope this video helps.